Hello. I thought this week we'd have a quick look at a job I finished recently, and it was a logo for a company. I was contacted by somebody called Mark Cosgrove, who's got a company called Toad Hall Automobilia and Antiques, and Mark's uncle made the Wind in the Willows cartoon series that a lot of you might remember if you're about my age. So yeah, he wanted Toad in his car zooming along to use as his logo for his business. So I thought it was a bit unusual, this job, because usually I would look at reference pictures and see what other people had done with the same sort of subjects, and I didn't want to be influenced too much by other illustrators' sort of handling of the subject. And I was pretty familiar with Toad anyway, so I thought I'll just see what happens if I try and draw Toad zooming along in a car. So this was my very first rough sketch. It's probably 10 minutes work, just very loose, just to try and see what the basic proportions would be, his body language. And I thought, as Mark was going to use this as a logo on his van, maybe, and maybe on letterheads, I'd keep it quite simple. So I used Adobe Fresco, and the reason I did that is because once I'd done this rough sketch, I could make that layer slightly transparent, start a new layer over the top, and clean it all up with this pen version. So I'll hide the blue pencil one. But the pens in Fresco, not all of them, but some of the pens in Fresco are vector drawing pens, vector tools, which means that when you zoom in, they never go pixelated. Like if we look at the pencil drawing, this is the pencil drawing. You can see it's just made up of lots of blocks. So if you blow this picture up too big, you'll see those blocks in the print. Whereas with the vector version, let's find it again. This one you can print as big as you like, and you'll never see those blocks. It'll always have a nice curved edge, which is really useful for stuff that's going to be made big. So that was the reason behind that. So I showed this stage to Mark, and he said he really liked it, but could he have a slightly sportier car? And he really liked my Advent watercolour pictures that I do each year. So something with a bit more of a watercolour feel rather than this sort of clean line art look. So there was a flat colour version as well. So I left Fresco behind and went back to my old favourite of Procreate and sketched a new version. So he wanted a 3/4, slightly sportier car, and more, kind of pencil-y rather than clean pen lines. And I did various versions of that. So there's the flat colour version, because you've always got to think about how these things might be used. Often when you're printing things like on t-shirts or whatever, you've got a limited number of colours you can use. So a flat colour version is quite useful. This is the flat colour with some paper texture. Oops. And then finally there's a version with the colour version and the watercolour, kind of some watercolour textures overlaid, which I'd scanned in. And that just adds a lot more variation to the tones of red and things that are there. Makes it more of an interesting background. But obviously, you need an infinite number of colours to print those kinds of things. So I showed that stage to Mark again, and he said he really loved it. He was nearly there, but could the car be British Racing Green? And could I also work in some of the automobilia, some of the petrol cans, the signs and the things that he sells in his business? So he wanted to get some kind of flavour of what his business was all about into the picture. So we'll have a look at the final version, which was, let's have a look there. So this time we've got the same car, but I added some boxes on the back. Loads of stuff falling out of the boxes, so the petrol cans, the signs, the oil cans and things that he collects. And then I also added the sort of representation of his shed behind, with the petrol pumps and the larger items that he also stocks. So yeah, that was the kind of final version. And then we'll go through and see the colour options. So there's a slight tone to the paper. And then here we've got just sort of flat colour with some gradients, just to a bit of a halo to the foreground, just to make it stand out from the background. So some flat colour. Then a layer of watercolour textures. These are a set of brushes that I got from somewhere, which are just, I think they're probably scanned, but they have a nice watercolour texture to them. So that adds a bit of randomness and grain. Then I added a bit of lighting. So if you look to the bonnet, just to give it a bit more three-dimensional form, so you can see some highlights and some shadows. And then this layer's some little highlights, points of white, just picking up some of the corners of things just to make them pop out a bit more. Then we've got our lines layer, which we can hide that and just see how the colours look on their own. If you carried on working, you could eventually lose the lines altogether if you wanted. But in this case, I think having the pencil lines makes it feel a bit more like a book illustration or something. And then last of all, we've got a signature and some grain. I think there's a bit of paper grain. Again, a piece of grey paper that I scanned in. And it just adds a little bit of contrast and texture. And that's we'll just hide the layers, and there's the final one. And hopefully that's the one that will be on the side of the van and above the door of the venue. Hope you enjoyed seeing that. I'll do some more soon.